time to time to ensure that our support services are really serving their needs. Thank you. The fourth session ends. We now proceed to the fifth debate session. The debate themes are political system, governance, and human rights. This session covers the following 5 policy areas: administration of justice and legal services, constitutional affairs, home affairs, district administration, and civic education, public service, and security. Members who wish to speak in this session will please press the request to speak button. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Mr. Deputy, undeniably, Hong Kong's political ecology and social environment have gone through a lot of changes. Some say that political news is just like the headlines of involving the entertainment industry. Every day we have seemingly true news. Some say that they have insiders news, insider story. But in fact, for many of the reports, I was only made aware of them by reading the news report. Perhaps we should all sit on the couch and watch TV with a drink and peanuts. People may say that Lechko is just like a show, but honestly speaking, sometimes the show is not what we would like to see. We don't want it to be like that. And we have to ask ourselves whether this is beneficial to the long-term interests of Hong Kong. Do we want to see a social instability, inability of the government to administer Hong Kong? Well, the government has been established for 7 months, and there are different repercussions in the community with a shortage of baby formula and parallel goods traders, and also problems associated with babies born in Hong Kong to non-local parents. Well, many people are watching, awaiting the budget to be announced next month to ensure that the policies announced in PA can really be delivered or implemented. However, the focus of public attention is on the illegal or unauthorized building structures of the CE, and officials have to go to different places to answer queries, to give an account of the matter. They are really rather exhausted. We want the government to focus on the pressing issues of society and to map out the blueprint for the future. According to the opinion poll of the Hong Kong U, public opinion program, before the PA was published, members of the public felt that these were the most pressing issues. Housing, 91% of the respondents felt it was the most important. Second, healthcare policies, 88%. Third, welfare service, social welfare, 87%. Economic development, 86%. As regards to Asia Pacific Institute for Research, according to an opinion poll, people thought that housing planning and also livelihood and welfare was most important. The response rate was 26.8% and 20.8% respectively, and then to be followed by economic development and medical and health care, 13.2% and 10.8% respectively. So the PA devoted a large part of it to housing and social welfare, and there are a number of short-term, medium, and long-term measures proposed. As we all know, that we cannot solve all housing problems overnight. After the policies are announced, we must very objectively assess the feasibility of these policies, point out the inadequacies, and to ensure that the policies can be implemented openly. And we should not just oppose for the sake of opposing. We should not rub salt onto wound, and we should not criticize so brutally measures that many civil servants have tried very hard to come up with. All right. Economic and livelihood issues are regarded as being have taken up very high priority in the community, and administration and constitutional development is not most pressing. I'm not saying that it's not important. We've already got a timetable for the implementation, but the details will need public contribution. As shown in the 2 opinion polls, the community would like to accord priority to housing, economic development, and social welfare. So we believe that we should focus more on economic and livelihood issues, and we must not put the cart before the horse. Constitutional development has brought a lot of controversies, in particular on the question of how to proceed towards universal suffrage is going to be very controversial. The CE said that the C election in 2017 and electrical election in 2016 will proceed as planned. There won't be any change. And in these 4 to 5 years, there will be sufficient time for consultation and planning. In the short term, we must have priorities. The government should accord priority to the question of poverty and housing. Since the DC has already given this pledge, we agree to its priorities. We should ease the tension in society and focus on addressing the deep-rooted conflicts in society first. While we may not be able to do this overnight, but I think the PA is a step towards the right direction. Only by so doing can we allay the concerns and deal with the grievances of the community, and only by so doing we can have a chance of achieving consensus, and we can advance democracy in Hong Kong.
In 191 of the policy address, there's a sentence that I very much support. That is, people's livelihood should be our focus. With a stable population, we'll have economy, and people's livelihood can also improve. And we bear the same concept in mind. Now, the PA says that in our drive to improve people's livelihood, we must take timely action to address the pressing needs of the community. So I very much agree to that, and I hope that the CE can honor his pledge. Mr. Dennis Kwok, Dr. Kenneth Chan, Mr. Deputy, people's livelihood is very much related to constitutional affairs. When people say that people emphasize work, livelihood, health, and environmental affairs, they also want press freedom, freedom of speech, independent judiciary, democracy, universal suffrage, and effective governance. We do not need to confront democracy and livelihood. It's just like we need not confront economy and democracy. In this council and outside this council, democracy has always been heading towards that direction. Unfortunately, pro-government members and political parties would like us to lose our memory, but they cannot do so. They can only pretend that they've lost their memory. They're not concerned about democratic development. This is actually a solemn promised in the Basic Law. And in this chamber, Pan-Democrats raised a number of times what's meant by a suitable time for consultation. The Secretary explained that this is something new, a new initiative. That's really absurd. It's laughable. To do constitutional consultation at an appropriate time is something new. Actually, even before the handover, we had very heated debate. We're now talking about a genuine universal suffrage. Do we want genuine universal suffrage for C election, LC election? I think we've all witnessed the disadvantage of a lack of democracy. It's a mess, unscrupulous tactics in order to gain status and power. All along, we've been seeing this very, very clearly. We need an open, fair, and transparent system. And recently, international bodies sounded an alarm to us. Press freedom, our ranking has dropped. With no democracy, that's doomed to be a phenomenon. Our judicial independence is being challenged because we don't have a democratic system, so it's eroded and affected. Public right to know. When we discussed the amendments to the company's ordinance, that's also our concern. Not just the press is concerned. A normal citizen, an ordinary member of the public is also concerned. In future, it will be even more difficult to inspect the company's register. If not for the system that allows us to peruse the company director's register, we won't be able to know the subdivided flat issue of Mr. Paul Chan and UBW issues. So the public's right to know is very important. So we have to promote constitutional reform, and the Civic Party is also advocating for freedom of information. We asked for the correspondence between the Buildings Department and C.Y. Leung on the UBWs. Eventually, they covered all the important information and data. They said that the parties involved did not authorize them to make public those information. Have we forgotten that we have freedom of information? Public's right to know is not protected. We don't have an archival law. Our collective memory may be lost. Internal discussion within the administration may vanish together with the archives. We're forced to lose our memory. We're talking about documents and archives of a height of several IFC. They'll be destroyed after C.Y. Leung assumed office. Archives represent the whole truth. Archives will cause us to hold the government accountable such that the government will be more cautious in its governance. So it's a very important issue. So we must legislate on that. C.Y. Leung said that he treasures press freedom and ensure that there will be press freedom. And for the action group on archival law, he said that after he assumed office, he would actively pursue that. Still, he mentions nothing in his policy address. A Czech writer had a very famous work which says that the ordinary public struggled with a dictatorial government. Is actually a struggle between insomnia and memory. The best method is to ask people to forget everything. June 4th incident, the same for other incidents. Please do not remember them. We attach importance to freedom, collective memory, and good governance. Without democracy, we still have to strive for them. We must strive for comprehensive public right to know. That's a civil right. Mr. Deputy, upcoming we'll have reform of the district councils. Each district will get $100 million. There may be landmark projects, electronic projects, etc. Ever since 2006, when we had the last reform, we should have another round of reform. Mr. Zhang Dak-sing, the Bureau Director, should listen to public views and views of the scholars. There must be a comprehensive review on district administration. The Pan-Democrats, including myself, have always been striving for direct elections since the 1980s, but in vain. Will not be disappointed. Will find hope in absolute hopelessness. Pan-Democrats cannot shirk their responsibility in this regard. On the policy address, the Civic Party and I will abstain. Will object to the motion of thanks. Ms. Emily Lau, we now come to the last session on governance and human rights. Well, Mr. Deputy, this should be the first part of the policy address. Governance, rights of the people, and political development should be something fundamental. But ever since the establishment of the SAR, these have been put at the end of the policy address. And ever since the LegCo decided to have separate sessions for the policy address, whoever was the CE, these issues were put at the last of the policy address. Well, if they could, I think they would have hoped that they could sweep these issues under the carpet. Livelihood development, economic development, and political development are interrelated. They are two sides of the same coin. On the 12th and 13th of February, the United Nations Human Rights Committee will call a public hearing. Maybe more junior civil servants would be sent to the hearing. They've never attached importance to the United Nations monitoring on human rights issues, but many lay organizations will send representatives there. The Democratic Party and I, as well as other organizations, will attend the hearing. We're not to badmouth the SARG. We would like to tell the committee, well, some of their members have been monitoring our progress for 20 years. They actually sighed. I recall that in 1988, one of their members already asked, "Can you tell me why, in terms of economy, Hong Kong developed so well, but in terms of human rights, rule of law, human rights and political freedom, Hong Kong is even worse than the third world?" At that time, well, of course, at that time, the British government was not good, and some of the officials here were already officials then. Of course, the officials had the responsibility to strive hard for those rights. And ever since then, Hong Kong people strived hard for those freedoms and rights. Now, in C.Y. Leung's policy address, as I said yesterday, there are only 2 paragraphs on these issues, 8 paragraphs on rights of the PWDs. And this morning, we had a breakfast meeting with the CE. We said right from the very beginning that these issues should be important issues. Now, the CE said that this policy address is a blueprint for the next 5 years. Why is it that for constitutional affairs, it's so unclear? And we told C.Y. Leung that constitutional reform has to take care of CE election in 2017 and LC election in 2016. If we can't have universal suffrage for LegCo in 2016, we must have it in 2020, and all functional constituencies should be abolished. He has a very important duty here. Not just his duty, but the duty of the whole SARG to implement this. But now, he doesn't even mention it. And the CPG has turned the 3-step approach into a 5-step approach. It will be a long and bended path. I think latest by 2015 we should legislate. Now it's the beginning of 2013. We have to go up, come down, etc., etc. Resolutions have to be passed. The bill has to be passed. So how long will all these take? The government and the consortia, as well as the CPG, may be resenting that they had said that in 2017, when we can have universal suffrage for CE election. Now they're trying to find a way to escape that. So C.Y. Leung's government is to say that it's so difficult, there are so many functional constituencies, they're bound to block you, of course. No matter what, I believe the Democratic Party will collaborate with those who agree with us. And recently we saw some articles by professors which claim that 10,000 people were blocking the streets in Central. They're against the law. But in fact, they are forced to put up a civic fight. Now these professors are forced to write the article, and they're willing to bear the consequences. Some people ask, does Hong Kong have political offenders or prisoners? Well, some people will say no, but how long before we will have political prisoners? Now the Democrats are seen as enemies of the government. I asked him this morning, I said he's more familiar with the mainland than we. Is it that he would like to introduce the cruel struggle culture of the Communist Party into Hong Kong? My family members and many members of the public died or were injured endlessly under communist rule, under the very cruel struggle culture of the Communist Party. If we are to introduce such struggle culture into Hong Kong, all of us will lose out. Now, in the SARG, some former officials were loved and respected by our people formerly. I hope that these people, no matter in what post they are, they will speak on the side of the people. Well, Mr. President, maybe you'll say that I'm very naive. How come we still have such hopes? We must not tell our 7 million people that in front of us there's no more hope. Even Aung San Suu Kyi said several years ago when she was still in prison, a reporter asked him whether she believed Burma would have freedom and democracy. She said yes. The reporter was alarmed, and she said that she trusted her people. They would resort to peaceful and rational means to strive for freedom and democracy, and they'll be very determined. Therefore, I hope that our SARG can start consultation as soon as possible so that our people can fully air their views, and those with vested interest should not block the progress. They're enjoying free lunch, breakfast, and dinner. You have been enjoying these political interests for many, many years. It's time for us to give them up.
So you should try to stand in an election where there is one man, one vote. Now, if you have the strength, you may not lose. And I think the administration is trying to bring mainland practices to Hong Kong, and that is rule by men, rule by people. Mrs. Anson Chan, the former CS4A, asked why all of a sudden a principal official could hire an assistant. And I said I didn't know how to give her an answer. Now, previously, the SAR government acted in accordance with rules and proper procedures. And then, but this is no longer the case. And then concerning the Financial Services Development Council, let's look at its composition. Now, we have representatives from mainland enterprises, and we have Mr. Chen Shuang, and we have the son of the former Premier Zhu Rongji. And so I don't want to spend all my time reading out the names. On Monday, the chairman of the council had a meeting with DP members, and I asked her whether she knew what was meant by one country, two systems. C.Y. Leung said that he appointed these people because of their expertise. Now, so in the mainland, there are many people with expertise. All of them will be appointed to sit on Hong Kong committees. One country, two systems means Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong, and we should enjoy a high degree of autonomy. We shouldn't have mainland enterprises and sitting on our committees. And then we were told it was a non-government organization, and then there were different versions, different stories told concerning the source of funding, and I told the chairman not to take part in destroying one country, two systems. And also, Mr. President, before he became CE, the CE said that he would combat hegemony by the developers. He talked about having the Leung camp. There used to be the Leung camp and the Tank camp. The Tank camp, in fact, was the developers, right? So the policy address was delivered on the 16th. And what happened on the 14th? Local delegates to the NPC, and many of them are electrical members, went to Shenzhen to hold a preparatory meeting. And the Deputy Secretary General of the NPC Standing Committee, Mr. Chiao Xiaoyao, read out a letter at the meeting. And it was a letter from Li Jianguo to local NPC delegates. Local NPC delegates, including those from the Tank camp and those from the Leung camp, should put aside their differences and should be united. And then what happened next, President? And then the chairman of the Executive Committee of the REIT, Mr. Stuart Leung, said on the 18th of January that the policy address mapped out the blueprint for the future housing policy and development in Hong Kong. And he felt that the PA was acceptable, and then property prices started to surge. So I think there is no hope that our housing problem can be resolved. This morning, I told C.Y. Leung that concerning PRH production, he was merely citing figures in the days of Donald Tsang. So in the next 5 years, the production figures will still be those put forward by Donald Tsang. The production figures will increase only after his present term. Do you know many people, parents and children alike, are feeling desperate? Now, you know, the price of residential property is $10,000 to $20,000 per square foot. So we now have the Leung camp and the Tank camp joining hands to make money at the expense of the interests of Hong Kong people. So, in the SAR government, President, are there still people who are willing to make fair and impartial remarks? And let me talk about the civil service, President. I have recently written to the Secretary for the Civil Service. Now, some members of the public have written to me. They have said that the SAR government should legislate to uphold and ensure the political neutrality of civil servants. Now, they can see the civil servants sometimes have to distort their own beliefs and to have to abandon their neutrality in order to appease certain or to please certain parties. And we hope that our civil servants can withstand such huge pressure. I hope that our accountable officials will have mercy upon the civil servants. Do not destroy our civil service. Now, many civil servants, in fact, have a very heavy workload, and what is more, they are asked to accede to or bow to unreasonable requests. And I think civil servants should speak out if they are asked to do unreasonable things. And in fact, I really hope that in our community, there are still people with a conscience who are still willing to make fair remarks or willing to speak out to uphold Hong Kong's core values. And the President, I now want to say something about the freedom to stage protests and demonstrations. The secretary is here. A couple of days ago, the CP came to LegCo, and I am sure that in March, when we are in the United Nations, there will be a heated discussion. We are told that on average every day we have 20 protests or demonstrations, and the figure is on the rise. So what does that mean? And I can remember Mr. Tong Chiu-hua saying that Hong Kong was the city of protests and demonstrations, and I asked him to ask himself why so many people decided not to lead a comfortable life and decided instead to take to the streets. Now there are police officers who in fact, are genuinely trying to maintain law and order. But do you know that, in fact, many demonstrators are very orderly. In 1989, when there was the massive protest after the June 4th incident, were there any police officers to keep order? There wasn't even one glass bottle, and there was no need to consult the district councils. And now, what is happening? Most Hong Kong people want to express their views and their anger in a peaceful and rational manner. In fact, I have asked the CP time and again to spend more time communicating with the protesters. The routes should be fixed after discussion, but please do not do things that will threaten and antagonize protesters. For example, taking close-up shots of these protesters. Now, if these things are done, then conflicts will be sharpened, and this will do Hong Kong no good. Now, many Hong Kong people are of the view that their freedoms are at risk. Their freedoms are being threatened. And what can protect our freedoms is the rule of law and an independent judicial system. But then, do you know what the CJ said? He said things should not be politicized. We hope that our judges will not be subject to political pressure. But then some judges seem to have suggested that they have been subject to political pressure. Now the CS4A and the S4J openly say that they will uphold the rule of law. But why is it that the S4J has been criticized by law academics in our universities? They are asking why it is appropriate to seek an interpretation of the basic law. And is it really appropriate to leave the matter to the courts? So democracy, we don't know when we'll have true democracy. And then the rule of law and human rights are under threat. And then concerning our judicial system, our courts, have they been subject to interference by the CS4A and other principal officials? And then we have the press, which can monitor the acts of the government. Now some of our journalists are not very experienced, I must admit, and in fact their salary levels are shamefully low, and I have to criticize and reprimand these media organizations and the operators of those organizations who make a lot of money. And do you know that sometimes those in power can call the boss, and as a result the story will not appear in the newspapers. And then do you know how the journalists are treated when Vice Premier Li Keqiang visited Hong Kong? The journalists were put in a room to watch the live broadcast, and only the official media could cover his trip. And then the reporters might be locked up and might be interrogated. Now you know that our Hong Kong's ranking in respect of our press freedom is dropping. So when will there be a day when we no longer have press freedom? And I think there are press workers in the mainland who are courageous I really respect them. Do you know that many human rights lawyers in the mainland have told me that we must uphold the freedom of the press in Hong Kong. Now we have in Hong Kong there is the rule of law. It's a clean city, but of course things are deteriorating. So we have to try our best. Now, so I'm speaking to the officials sitting opposite to me. You may be principal officials, you may be high-ranking officials in the colonial era. I want to ask you whether you are really upholding Hong Kong's core values. What are these core values? Some say that our CE is a CE who deceives others. And I want to say that the DP and the people of Hong Kong will work together to fight for democracy and will also uphold our core values. The DP opposes this very hollow policy address. Mr. Peter Charles Mock.
Okay. 主席，喺部分
President, I want to say something about security. A few days ago, the CP reported to LegCo the crime situation in Hong Kong. It said that cybercrime was on the rise. And in fact, we've seen many cyber deception cases. We've seen such cases in TV programs. Still, many people have become victims of such deception cases. And so we really must step up our efforts to combat such crime. But then what about the functions of the relevant authorities? Some are worried that concerning this network security center, of course, the staff are very professional, but yet we have these incidents in the police, like leakage of personal data of members of the public, and also the Foxy incidents and so on and so forth. So I want the Security Bureau to carry out another interdepartmental internet security assessment. That was done a decade ago. You know, a lot of changes have taken place. Because 10 years ago, we could not expect the development of the social media and also the internet. But of course, assessments should also be monitored by independent people, including LegCo. If people are of the view that they are being monitored and under surveillance, then there will be undesirable effects.
When it comes to democratic development, well, we have to speak in this area because we don't have a democracy. As long as there is a small circle election, as long as our CE is anointed and appointed, then all we have is just a cheat executive, one that deceives. We will not have a future. Our society and our council, are they plagued with conflicts and disputes? Because we don't have any other choices. As long as there is different functional constituency and with split voting, there will not be the chance for us to reflect what the public would like to see, and our society will continue to be divided. C.Y. Leung said in his policy address in a vague manner that in the right time they will start consultation on the election method for the CE and the LegCo. And there is no timetable set down. And if he thinks that it's never the right time, then means we will never have universal suffrage. So I urge the administration to conduct a public consultation for the election methods of the CE in 2017 and Legislative Council in 2016, instead of giving us excuses, and give us a clear roadmap. There should not be any threshold to screen out people people who were able to stand. So we will have a threshold, and then only a selected few has been allowed to run, and then the only one that is anointed will win. Apart from the CE,
Legislative election and district council elections are plagued with vote planting or rigging, but they have not been dealt with seriously by the law enforcement agencies. And there are some suspicious methods that amounts to vote planting. Say, for example, in my sector, they will use a swapping of membership, and all of a sudden there is a surge of a number of members, and hundreds of members just before the election found out that they have been disqualified. I've been chasing the Electoral Affairs Commission. Over 448 people out of the 6,000 voters lost their eligibility to vote just before the election. So we're talking about 6.7% of voters. If in a election 6.7% of the voters are told at the last minute that they cannot vote, then there is a serious problem. Compared to other functional constituencies, there is less than 1% of the voters losing the eligibility. It's a good job that the number of votes between the winner and the losers is more than 6.7%. Otherwise, the story will never end. So I suspect that there is an organized vote planting, but it's not been followed up. We need public mandate that is credible, and that is essential in an election. I think, as Secretary, there has to be followed up and investigated into. According to survey, we have about 90,000 practitioners in our sector, but we only have thousands of voters. Of course, the smaller the number of voters, the easier it is to manipulate it. Before the abolition of the functional constituency, we have to broaden the electoral base to minimize the chance of the system being manipulated. And the FC should not be manipulated by corporate votes. Before we have universal suffrage, FCs should represent as many people as possible from different sectors and areas. When it comes to consultation on sexual orientation, the policy address has been very disappointing. They even refuse to consult. I think we have to. The more you discuss it, the better you will understand it. So in relation to consultation to legislate against discrimination against sexual orientation, I think they're dodging this issue. You need to have a big heart. You need to have a big heart to love, to be accommodating, and to be tolerant. In a Hong Kong economic journal, Mr. Lam Heng-ji wrote a few articles to comment on the policy address. He said that if the CE does not have in its mind welfare of the people, to seek to be tolerant, then the core values that we've been so proud of will be eroded one day. And in different stages, Hong Kong people will start mass movements, and that will be a trend. People who were proud of our rule of law and a clean government and freedom will be very sad. And it will be shown in their lives. The governance of C.Y. Leung sink the heart of Hong Kong people. I'm afraid I cannot thank him for his policy address. His manifesto sounds grand, but they have not been made good. The policy address is a mini version of what he promised, but cannot deliver. We need to have a democratic system. Of course, democracy cannot resolve all problems, but without democracy, the problems that plague us will continue to exist. Mr. Siu-ping. Mr. President, one of the issues in this session is in relation to public service. In C.Y. Leung's manifesto, he said that he would narrow down the terms of service between civil servants and NCSCs, non-civil service contract staff. And he would also allow NCSC staff to convert to the permanent establishment. But he has not delivered, and I'm very disappointed. A number of posts within the civil service have been outsourced, and sometimes they do it by contract staff and sometimes by agency workers. The excuse is that this will provide flexibility to swiftly respond to the operation needs of different departments. The fact is, NCSCs or contract or outsourced workers or agency workers are subject to different treatments. They do the same job, but they receive a different salary. Their terms of employment, their career prospect are very different. So they've created a second-class civil servants. This has divided the civil service and dampened morale. Starting from 1999, the administration has been exploiting NCSC staff, and it's been going on for over 10 years. There are quite a number of departments engaging NCSCs, the Department of Health, Education Bureau, EMSD, Hong Kong Post, and the LCSD. These are departments with the most NCSC staff. In the policy address, the CE was silent in this regard. He's completely neglected it. The administration uses reasons like it's time limited and it's seasonal to employ NCSCs. They've in a way divided the civil service team, and in turn affected the service provided to the general public. In the policy address, the CE said that he will, in accordance with operational needs, increase manpower. I hope that he will not just create posts at the top echelon, whereas the shortage of manpower on the frontline level will continue. There is a difference of 5,000 to 6,000 people between the establishment and the actual manpower required. Vacancies are created by retirement, but you can predict the number of people who are going to retire and when they're going to take retirement leave. The administration can, before someone retires, start the recruitment exercise to fill the vacancy as soon as possible. I so submit. Mr. Chung-kai. Thank you, Mr. President. The CE in the policy address was silent about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Perhaps it's because it's reached a freezing point. And in the paragraph 195, he says that at the right time, he will launch. The government will launch a comprehensive consultation on the election methods of the CE in 2017 and LC in 2016. And in reply to Ms. Emily Lau's question, he said we still have time. But I think we have a very tight time schedule. In June 2010, the resolution in relation to the constitutional reform was endorsed. We only have about 18 months to June 2016, and we have to deal with the election methods of the CE in 2017 and the LC in 2016. So we don't have much time. And the issues we have to deal with is more complicated than the last time. Last time it was an interim. It was an interim stage. Now we're talking about universal suffrage for CE in 2017. It's never been done. What about the nomination method? Is there any threshold? What is the composition of the election or the nomination committee? And how is that returned? We need plenty of time to make preparation. And I believe that the local legislation will take a lot longer than the last time because we're talking about something new. And when we talk about the election method of the Legislative Council in 2016, then people will know that it's related to 2020. But you say that, well, according to the 5 steps, we are not to deal with the election in 2020. But if we do not deal with the election in 2020, how can we have consensus? What if the public expects universal suffrage in 2020? That means the FC will be abolished. Does it mean that in 2016 at least half of the FC will be abolished? Just asked. And the members here, you know that it's not easy to get their consent to abolish half of the FC members. And we're told that we still have plenty of time. I think we have no time to lose. It's been 7 months since the CE has taken office. His popularity rating has been dropping. The only thing that is on the increase is the number of people taking to the street. I think we all feel that there is a governance crisis and a number of political conflicts. It is only through realizing the democratic procedure can we resolve these conflicts. Siu-ping spent 7 to 8 years, and in the end, 500,000 people took to the street. And for Leung, right after he's taken office, and then there was the assembly related to national education, and then the New Year Day. And I think there will be a lot of people taking to the street in the coming 1st of July. I think within a very short time, the record of Siu-ping will be broken by Leung. Ch-tong will be broken by Leung. We are feeling less and less patient with the small circle election. We're feeling more and more eager to have democracy. We hope the consultation on universal suffrage the consultation on the election methods will be triggered as soon as possible. This Sau-lan government should take some action instead of just talking. We have expectations. Perhaps the Sau-lan government has yet to receive instructions. As you all know, that when it comes to the group that oversees the Hong Kong affairs, they're still handing over, the powers is being handed over. So we may have to wait until the new state leaders have been, the dust of the appointment of the state leaders settled before we know more about it.
營造香港人嘅局。
Siu Leung should forge consensus in Hong Kong. Hong Kong people are getting more and more polarized. It is even more difficult to get consensus. We had before a de facto referendum. If we don't have any consensus, we don't really need 5 district de facto referendum. It would take one single member to resign to trigger a de facto referendum. I hope that the administration will heed this gentle reminder and put in place a timetable for consultation on universal suffrage. Time is pressing. We don't really want to take to the street to force the hands of the administration. The members of the public will be patiently waiting, but if the government is sitting idly by, we'll see you all on July 1st. Dr. N. Chung. President, first of all, we welcome the remark, the statement and policy addressed that there will be universal suffrage. The DAB supports a universal suffrage for the chief executive in 2017, and the DAB will take forward this universal suffrage. The universal suffrage for the leaders the world over can be divided into two types. First, indirect election to elect the leaders. Second, through one man, one vote, we elect the local leaders. The DAB is in support of universal suffrage, one man, one vote, for electing the chief executive in 2017. We are concerned about the eligibility of the chief executive. How can we elect someone who can lead the civil service, who has the administrative experience? Some said that the simpler, the better. It should be as simple as someone who has a permanent Hong Kong ID card. I beg to differ. I don't really want to see loads of candidates in an election forum engaging in a debate. If this is the case, it would be very difficult for the members of the public to pick and choose. As you recall, in the Philippines a couple of years ago, there was a famous comedian who was elected as president of the Philippines. However, because of bribery and corruption, he was forced to step down. In California, we also have a mega star who was elected as state governor. And this state has become the first state in the U.S. To be on the brink of bankruptcy. In Europe, there are so many countries that are teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and they're studying the Asian situation. One of the success stories. Tony Blair, former British Prime Minister, recommended that a third wave be considered, a third path be considered. For the sake of Hong Kong, for the sake of people's livelihood, we have to move on with times. We have to make changes according to times. And all these electoral details have to be thought through. The DAB support the administration's intention to mount extensive consultation regarding universal suffrage in 2017 and get started with all these steps. Thank you. Scott Yumbo, President. Very soon, the administration will announce measures to help with the infants in Hong Kong regarding the baby formula. These measures are better than nothing. It's always better late than never. What is alarming is that all these measures were already suggested at the blogosphere. Wong Sai-chak, Lam Kay, and Lam Hong Tat. They've made all these recommendations in the blogosphere. The government is always backward in coming forward. We are in the run-up to the Lunar New Year, and the parallel goods traders are scooping up or snapping up the products in Hong Kong. Last year, there were 20 million mainland visitors coming to Hong Kong just for a day trip. 20 million trips were made to Hong Kong. No overnight stay, they come and go. Of course, they were making contribution to our economy, but we see that obviously these are apparently great goods traders. The administration has to tackle the problem at source. You have to get rid of these multi-entry visas for the mainland visitors, in particular between Shenzhen and Guangdong province. President, in Hong Kong, we are becoming more like the mainland of China. Under the Basic Law, we enjoy high degree of autonomy. How to define high degree? Is the definition my definition or your definition? The high degree of autonomy in Hong Kong means that our lifestyle will remain unchanged for 50 years. But Canton Road has become swarmed by the mainlanders, and they're trying to reclaim Shangshui. Mongkok MTR station is just in a shambles. CNN came and filmed everything. I mean, it is very much a spectacle the world over. Property, toilet rolls, everything is being snapped up by mainlanders. And we keep saying that in the morning they're in Shangshui, in the afternoon, and they go to Tai Kwok Chui. I mean, it's all in a shambles all over Hong Kong. This infant formula debacle, I hope that we can address this problem. Next, what next? The chocolate Lunar New Year, Yakult, the cookies, the cows and cookies. I mean, I hope that the administration will show some determination and tell the mainland authorities that this multi-entry visas would have to go. President, the C.Y. Leung administration makes people feel that he's always dishing out these political rewards, just like the soap opera on TV. People feel that he is rewarding his supporters, but in an uneven manner, an unfair manner. Former Commissioner of Police, Security Chief, they enjoy these prestigious appointments at such a high level. We are very concerned about all these top officials behaving themselves. President, you must remember that when President Hu came and visited Hong Kong, he was asked a question about June the 4th. The policeman received some instruction from on high that the top leaders should not be embarrassed. I mean, is there any offense under the law like an embarrassment offense? The law enforcement agencies should not be working in their own interest. They should not be exercising self-restraint in this regard. Press freedom, according to the International Journalism Organization, we are slipping down the rank. We used to be 18th in the ranking. Now we have slipped down to 50th. We have dropped 40 notches over the past 10 years. It's got nothing to do with C.Y. Leung. We cannot attribute this to him. The UK submitted a report to the House of Commons on Hong Kong, and it is telling the whole world that journalists in Hong Kong are concerned about self-censorship being exercised under the leadership of C.Y. Leung. The C.Y. Leung doesn't take a blind bit of notice about it. Now, this is about press freedom, and this is wholly unacceptable. Now, the government evaded the archives law and freedom of information law. I mean, the government is not particularly concerned. And they are trying to bring in this stalking law. And under the company's ordinance, people are denied access to the information of the directors. In this Medicine Sans Frontier report, China is labeled as a prison for the netizens. C.Y. Leung keeps talking about integration between Hong Kong and the mainland. I don't think we like to be integrated like this. We are very concerned that this kind of governance, this kind of administration will make a ranking for another 10 notches in the coming year. President, I'd like to turn now to the right of the ethnic minorities. In the policy address, there are a few lines devoted to the ethnic minorities. They find it difficult to integrate because they have difficulties with Chinese. I thought that there would be something in the area of education, but it is completely silent on this under education. The Secretary for Education said that they would support the ethnic minorities' efforts to learn English. They haven't gone so far as to say that Chinese would become a second language for the ethnic minorities. They are not even able to make this undertaking. At a panel meeting, they said that they have no idea what the ethnic minorities really want. Do they want to learn Chinese to such an extent that they would be able to communicate with local people, or do they want to learn to such a level that they would be able to take admission to the top universities? English is our second language. Would we ask our kids why they learn English? Do they want to get admitted to Harvard, or do they want to aspire to higher learning? English is a universal tool. I mean, the Education Bureau doesn't care about it. President, it is the executive that rules Hong Kong. This is the legislature. Obviously, the administrative philosophy of C.Y. Leung is for the legislature to work with the executive. He didn't use the word cooperation, like Xi Jinping when he visited Hong Kong. If he wants Let's Go to work with the executive, then it is flying in the face of this idea of three different branches of government keeping each other on their toes. The government's position is very clear. In the next election, functional constituencies will not go. And you may expand the electoral base. There are 5 super district council seats who get elected here. Next time, would they be introducing any super seats? You are legitimizing all these unfair situations, and you're telling the people of Hong Kong that they are very representative. If you create a functional constituency for housewives, that would be very representative. A lot of Hong Kong people will be in their midst. What about university undergraduates? Thank you.
Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan. Thank you, President. Mr. Tam Chi-yuen, you can take 1 year's leave because after the policy address is delivered, there's nothing for you to do. I've never seen a policy address like this. And there's an announcement of saying that there will be no consultation. For legislation on protecting people of different sexual orientation, we're going to listen to views that there's no plan to conduct consultation. What's the point of listening to people's views if you have no plan to consult them? On constitutional development, the government will embark on wild consultation at an appropriate time. That's tantamount to saying nothing. So maybe you should take leave until the time you are required to work. And there is not going to be any consultation on both issues. We don't have a lot of time for constitutional development. If in 2017 we have to introduce universal suffrage, we have to get the law ready by 2016, and it's just 3 years later. Why can't you start the consultation now so that we know what kind of electoral system will be under the universal suffrage approach? We are concerned whether it's genuinely the universal suffrage. I know this is worded in such a manner because the central authorities have to make the decisions, and you're not going to work on it before the directives come from the central authorities. And once they come, you will try to impose them on Hong Kong people. So we are going to see a repeat of what happened in the past, and that is we will be forced to accept whatever is offered. And you try to squeeze it down our throat. So in other words, you are not sincere. Well, we doubt whether there is going to be genuine universal suffrage. This is the last session in the motion of thanks. Our government is facing a crisis of integrity and confidence. Once you are not regarded as credible or your integrity is questioned, then the people will lose faith in your promises. And there are promises in the manifesto which are not honored, or you may, or sometimes you the backpedaled. For example, OALA, last time you said that the money given by the children will not be counted. Yesterday, the official said that if you save some of the money given to you by your children, it will be counted towards your asset. And then Mr. Leung-sing exposed more secrets, and that is C.Y. Leung cheated not just us but also the central authorities, and he tried to offer the benefits in exchange of support. It's impossible for C.Y. Leung to govern when he has no integrity. So either we would be very, very miserable. If we want to do away with this misery, the only solution would be for C.Y. Leung to step down. Mr. Michael Tin. Well, $1.8 billion, according to the policy address, will be given to the 18 district councils for projects. There will be a briefing on the 6th of February, but the district councils are required to come up with hasty proposals before March. So there's only a short time for the district councils, and every project should incur an expenditure no less than $30 million. So they have to do this within 10 odd days. If my favorite project will only incur an expenditure of $28 million, then perhaps I should find ways to spend more. And the project must have a long-term effects in the district. So what do you want? Are you looking for the pleasing the appearance or functionality? Well, if something is attractive and pleasing in appearance, well, it's difficult to come by. It may have to do with some special factors. For example, I'm from Chun-wan. We need an escalator near entrance A4 because 30,000 people will be using that entrance daily. MTR has been operating there for 30 years, and every day these people have to walk 44 steps up for access. I would regard this as an important project. And MTRC also agrees that this would make it convenient. And now we are still discussing who would foot the bill on maintenance. But if you are after iconic structures or good-looking structures, then these practical projects will certainly not be chosen. I don't think the tourist guide would take people to take a look at this escalator. It's said that district problems should be solved at the district level, and district opportunities should also be seized at the district level. I hope the government would not come up with too much red tape. I'm afraid these projects will not be people-based. This morning, we heard the administration's response on poverty alleviation and education. I cannot help but respond to those responses. Mr. Ng Kim, Secretary for Education, was referring to comments on making our education more elitist. I'm very disappointed. The Hong Kong Institute of Education announced the finding of a survey comparing the students coming from rich families and those from grassroots. They compare 1991 and 2011 in terms of admission to universities. It's found that for those who are living in PRH or who are new arrivals, their chance of admission to universities is far lower than local students and those from rich families. It's just 1/3 of the rate of admission of local students and those from rich families. Well, this is a sign of intergenerational poverty. And for poverty alleviation, well, it's about helping the poor and not getting rid of poverty. And you get assistance as long as you are poor, but not anymore. And the policy address actually draws a brand on this. According to the Secretary, education expenditure accounted for 1/5 of the total expenditure of government. I ask myself whether this is really expenditure or is it really investment. Many members have spoken on this. If it's investment, you look at its percentage of GDP, OECD 6.2%, G20 5.7%. And what about us? The percentage is 4.5%. Education expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Ours is on the low side. According to the Hong Kong IE survey, students from poor families are not admitted as much as other students because of the lack of support. Those who are qualified for admission to degree programs exceed the number of places by 4,000 to 5,000. If we add 5,000 first degree programs, we will only increase the expenditure by $4 billion, and that would push the percentage of expenditure on education as a percentage of GDP to 4.7%, and it's still lower than the 6.2% of OECD countries. When I put this to the Secretary would just say that we cannot just increase recurrent expenditure like that. So I must ask the CE to reconsider. The Secretary also mentioned that the 15 years of free education proposal is being studied. We have the voucher system, and what's happening? Starting from 2007-2008, when we first introduced the voucher system, some 100 kindergartens, or 10% of the total number, have withdrawn. These are the elite kindergartens who are never short of takers. And there are some famous kindergartens in Kowloon. Just some of them would be on the voucher scheme. They will withdraw next year. So next year, parents will have to pay another $20,000 for the same kindergarten. Isn't this elitist? The voucher scheme for kindergartens and also the DSS schools for primary and secondary schools all point to this direction. Well, I'm I'm a member of a school management board in a DSS school, I have to declare my interest. So social mobility is hindered, but the government turn a bright eye to this. I've got some time left, so perhaps I can return to my favorite subject, English. Some people think that if you are good at English, you have everything. You can rid yourself of poverty. Certainly, if our children are good in English, they will certainly be benefited. So we have been talking about raising English standards for years. Before the policy address was delivered, I told the CE that we should focus on those in the age group of 4 to 8 years old. There should be native English speaking teachers telling stories to them and listen to the teachers' English delivery, and so that they will not just be exposed to local accent or accents of domestic helpers. Many academics agree that the critical period is the age group of 4 to 8. The CE said, well, it was an innovative idea, but nothing is contained in the policy address. There's no reference to English language learning or education. I think in P1 and P2, English teaching should be by net teachers only. Local teachers should teach senior forms. They should teach fewer classes, and they should be given more time for preparation. This will enhance English teaching and learning. Chinese people attach importance to education, and our future generations are our future. Investment in education is an investment, and if we invest wisely, we'll get good returns.
Mr. Tian, if you have spoken in the third session, I believe the Secretary for Education would have been able to respond to you, to respond to you. Ms. Sit-ho, perhaps Siu-wan Leung thinks that Hong Kong people will be happy as long as they get the crumbs off the table from developers, as long as they have a roof over their head, as long as they can make a living, they will be content. He's completely ignored Hong Kong people's desire for justice, for democracy, and human rights. Throughout the entire policy address, when it comes to human rights, democracy, and freedom, and also preservation of our history and records, there is nothing. Hong Kong people want to have democracy, and the desire has exceeded one person, one vote. We want to have democratic infrastructure. We understand that we have to protect the rights of minorities through legislation, through fairness, procedural fairness. Their rights will be protected, and we will continue to progress when there is rational discussion. Back in 1996, we already had a legislation against discrimination. However, in 2012, we have come across a lot of resistance, even when it comes to consultation on discrimination against sexual orientation. And surveys shows that 60% of the respondents support a consultation for legislation against sexual orientation. And that message is very clear. But for some people, some religious people, some people who are very conservative, they don't want to see this happening. They put pressure on the CE. So for this humble consultation, the request for this humble consultation is made to disappear from the policy address. When it comes to, this consultation on human rights would have been a bright spot of the policy address because it's widely supported by over 60%, and it is, this shows that the administration is of an open mind. But I'm afraid since the CE was afraid that his popularity rating will further drop, this part has been left out from the policy address. And we've heard from the CE that he will not succumb to the pressure from developers. He was he seemed quite courageous when he uttered these words. But why is he so afraid when it comes to people with different sexual orientation? And in the question and answer session in the council, I have cited a number of ridiculous and ludicrous examples, and I asked the CE if these examples would constitute discrimination. I just asked him for a clarification. It's just common sense. I say, for example, if a parent objects to the children marrying someone from the same sex, is it against the law? And if in a fairy tale it doesn't touch on a same-sex relationship, would it be against the law? This is just common sense, but the CE was afraid to answer such simple questions, and he would rather blame himself that he didn't know about the law, and he didn't want to show show his ignorance and dodge the issue. And in order not to lose the little popularity that he has, he would rather sacrifice the rights of the minority. And he would rather fan the fear in society against the rights of such group of minority. Then how can we support the policy address? But I'd like to say a few words commenting Mr. Raymond Tam, the secretary, because he answered questions that the CE was not brave enough to answer. He answered in a panel that the cases would not constitute discrimination, and he even elaborated to the press, because in those cases I've cited, there is no malicious attack. The clarification coming from Mr. Tam was very important, because that is under his purview. And in the future, when it comes to legislation, it will be the secretary to draft the legislation and to formulate the policy objective. You only have to spend 1 minute to explain, to dispel unnecessary concern from members of the public. However, the CE did not have the guts to do that. Well, even though the administration will not conduct public consultation, it will still be done in the civic community. This is the cover of a magazine for the February issue. It talks about discrimination against people with different sexual orientation in Chinese societies. It also talks about in various Chinese societies the role of fighting for equality. There will continue to be activities in the civic community. We will use our power, do our best to help the community dispel concern and fear, to help them understand about the discrimination that exists in our society. I'd like to remind the administration that we should not allow discrimination to exist under the name of a moral high ground. It's the administration's duty to dispel, to do something about it. But if you continue to lag behind, you only give us another reason, give people another reason to continue to discriminate. Does any other member wish to speak? Dr. Fernando Zhang. When it comes to human rights, this policy address is scanty. It's touched lightly on the Convention on Human Rights. He says that besides talking about implementing it, he only talks about the terms of reference of the Commissioner for Rehabilitation and his function. But under the convention, they require signatories to set up an independent mechanism to monitor the government in the implementation of the convention. But the administration has been dodging the issues left, right, center. and they did not use Paris principle to set up this mechanism to monitor the implementation. Without such mechanism in place, the administration will only monitoring itself, just blowing its own trumpet. And I think that when it comes to flow of information, archive, legislation for archive, free flow of information, it's been silent. And under the company's ordinance, there will be restrictions on company search. This will undermine our freedom of press and our right to search about information of board of directors. And this is not in line with our human rights. I find it regrettable. Ms. Yuen-han. Thank you, Madam President. Sorry, Mr. President, because I was thinking about women's rights. Well, I want to talk about two areas. First, an enhancement of the role played by district administrations and rights, women's rights. Previously, before I left the LegCo, I was working on a number of legislations protecting women's rights, and then I left the council, and I heard from the FTU that if the few pieces of legislations were put in place, it would have been very beneficial to society. There are a number of cases related to women's rights handled by the Equal Opportunities Commission. I think if you rely just on the Commission, it is insufficient. The relevant departments should also take this up. And the mainland is doing much better in this regard. Mr. Tam, this is under your purview. It's about discrimination against women. And they include poverty and difficulties they encounter in life. These have to be tackled. Next. This may straddle between the CMAB and the HAB. This is in relation to district councils. In the panel on constitutional affairs, I have talked about some observations. In 1999, I was a legislator. The administration said that because of the complicated structure and because of issues and problems, the two municipal councils have been abolished. And interested parties, councils, and the public were told that the relevant departments will take up their work. And when it comes to the legislation for provision of municipal services, and it talks about enhancing the role of district councillors, and they will be given administrative powers like their own administrative region. And we learn about the administration's stance that they were afraid that if there is a delegation of power, there may be a confusion and a difficulty in the implementation of policies, and there may be different standards. And it has drawn criticism. The operation of the 18 district councils have matured, and I don't think that. Well, district councillors, in the next term, they will all be directly elected. And they will have the capabilities to carry out their work. In Wong Tai Sin District Council, when we're familiar with, when Donald Tsang said that when it comes to policies that some people don't like, say, for example, Columbaria, Wong Tai Sin was the first district that saw the construction of such facilities. And I see that, when people have the heart to carry out, to achieve the same goal, then it will be very effective. So what Mr. Lam Wing-kwang said was not right. When the councils when the municipal councils were abolished, some people say that there may be a gap there. some duties and some functions will have to be performed by, say, for example, some civic organizations. And it was floated at that time that district issues should be dealt with by district administration. It's just like what the CY said, that addressing district issues at the local level and capitalizing on local opportunities. This means that district administration initiated by the government should be complemented by active district participation. And the way forward is to delegate certain work and responsibilities to the DCs. And I think this is progress compared to what Mr. Lam Mun-kong said. But I don't know who is going to take this up, Mr. Deng or Mr. Tam. And in the next election, we will have a direct election for all DCs. So is the district officer going to be promoted? And the chairman of the district council, is he going to be the head of the district? Everyone in the district council give positive feedback to the administration. So when it comes to district administration, we hope the two bureau will handle the issues and actually take them up. And I hope that we will not be disappointed this time. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Gary Fan. Mr. President, in the policy address, it touches on, it says that the civil service is an important asset to Hong Kong. And NCSC staff working in various departments or bureau have been marginalized and simply forgotten. When it comes to outsourcing, the cancellation of which, and also to convert NCSC posts into permanent positions, that there was nothing mentioned in this regard. They have not given any concrete undertaking for to people who have contributed greatly into the civil service. We think that the permanent establishments should be expanded and put in place mechanism for excellent or good NCSC staff to convert into the permanent establishment so that quality of service can be maintained. Article 24(1) of the Basic Law clearly set out that one of the definitions of permanent citizens of Hong Kong states that Chinese citizens born in Hong Kong before or after the establishment of the Hong Kong SARG. It's very clear. So if you have a sound mind, no matter how you interpret it, you will not be able to distort or misunderstand this clear article and use it to overturn the Zhong Fengyun case in 2001 in relation to babies born to mainland parents and their right to get right of abode.
When the Secretary for Justice under Article 158(3) considered seeking interpretation of the Basic Law, Article 24, by the NPCSC regarding the babies born to mainland mothers with no ties to Hong Kong. I think the action speaks for itself. The SJ is taking advantage of Hong Kong people's resentment about the mainland pregnant women in order to seek reinterpretation of the Basic Law by NPCSC. This is undermining the principle of the three branches of government in Hong Kong, and this is something we cannot accept. There are many from the pro-establishment camp who criticized the judges in Hong Kong who don't really understand the relationship between the mainland and Hong Kong, and that they don't really understand the basic law, and they keep emphasizing that it is an important part of the Constitution to seek interpretation, and some even go so far as to say they will have to regularize this interpretation mechanism. I believe that the three branches of administration will be forced into a cooperative mode, and this is undermining the autonomy of Hong Kong. The New Democrats feel that since the basic law is clear and the judges are exercising their rights and adjudicate in accordance with the basic law, we don't believe that the fault lies with the Court of Final Appeal. It's just that when the basic law was drafted, there was no thorough consideration. The basic law has been promulgated for so many years. If we find that the provisions cannot meet the situation currently, then we should amend Article 24 of the basic law, and that is the way to go in dealing with these mainland pregnant women giving birth in Hong Kong. President, if I may turn now to constitutional development and democracy. I remember on July 1st last year, when on the first day Siu Leung was elected, there were 400,000 people taking to the street, articulating their displeasure and discontent with the CE, and they also demonstrated to seek universal suffrage sooner rather than later. The chief executive delivered this, what he considered to be the blueprint for the next 5 years. He never attempted to address these aspirations. And on the question of consultation on universal suffrage, he just played down on it. During the last election, the liaison office was involved, and it was endorsed by the council, which was composed 50% by the functional constituencies, and we ended up with the functional constituency district council seats. And this is paving the way for the permanent presence of the functional constituencies. And when the people of Hong Kong are denied universal suffrage, and we cannot cave into the mainland authorities. We believe that what happened to 2012 is likely to happen again. This is what I consider to be a tragedy. The New Democrats do not subscribe to the idea of negotiating with the mainland authorities without any bottom line in order to achieve a constitutional model. We believe that in 2016 there should be universal suffrage for the LegCo and universal suffrage for the CE in 2017. And this is a rectification of this distorted system and ensure democracy is achieved in Hong Kong. Siu Leung doesn't have the courage to right the wrong. He doesn't even, or he doesn't even handle the functional constituencies or the appointment system well enough, like ex officio members and so on. We are concerned that maybe the administration would only wait until a long time before the functional constituency seats would be abolished, beginning 2016. The district councils are advisory bodies, but in terms of planning, the district councils at the Hong Kong have not fulfilled their advisory role. In particular, in this Northeast NT development. President, we are fighting for one man, one vote, and this is a form of democracy. A true democratic institution requires the cooperation of the civic society. We should have freedom of speech, freedom of journalism. We should have preservation of human rights, in particular ethnic minorities. According to a survey in mainland China, the ranking has risen a notch. It is 7th from the bottom. In Hong Kong, our position has been slipping all these years. We have slipped 4 positions to 58th. We have been overtaken by Taiwan. This is unprecedented. Hong Kong has been subsumed under the mainland China. We are concerned that we will be integrated with the mainland of China in terms of freedom of journalism, and this is attributable to the work of the Hong Kong administrative region government. We heard this black shirt shadow theory, and we have the reduction of the press zones in public events. Under the company's ordinance, the media and the members of the public are denied the opportunity to get access to the residential addresses and ID numbers of the directors. This undermines the ability of the media to monitor the situation and the public right to know, and the freedom of journalism is further undermined. Recently, the police have tried to crack down on rallies and public meetings, and this is ignoring public right under the Basic Law. We've seen the core security zone, the sound cannon, and also other measures that are showing the attitude of the police. We're advocating equal right for gay people, but they are subject to unfair treatment. In the policy address, there is no review of the POO, which is restricting people's freedom, and also no timetable for consultation on equal right for people with of different sexual orientation. If we carry this motion of thanks in relation to the policy address, which doesn't offer us any freedom, any guarantee of the freedom, then it would be a bit of a joke. Mr. Gary Fan, you have to stop the noise, please. Well, we can only hear your voice. If you don't stop this noise, I will have to order you out of the council. Today, the administration announced the measures to stop these parallel goods traders. They hope that through the legal means, the grey goods traders will be stopped scrambling for these infant formula and studying all these measures. It is just like what the policy address is saying. They have all these committees formed to study all the issues. I hope that they would heed the protests of the people of Hong Kong and the squeals of the babies. You don't have Hong Kong uppermost in your mind. You have mainland uppermost in your mind, and this is wholly regrettable. I'm going to vote against this motion of thanks. mysteriously. President, over the past 6 months, the administration is mired in difficulties. Before he assumed office, C.Y. Leung's reform of the government secretariat has been voted down. We have started for 3 months, and we have proposed a vote of no confidence on Eddie Ng and Paul Chan. Now, we have activated all these procedures on C.Y. Leung. There is unprecedented confrontation and conflict between the executive and the legislature. Councillors are very strident in their remarks, in their criticisms. Some mounted personal attack on C.Y. Leung. I don't really want to repeat some of the offensive remarks. In fact, some councillors are being personal instead of just commenting on facts. Some said that in this policy address, there is very little coverage on constitutional development. Under MPCSC decision, we can elect the chief executive in 2017. This is 2013. I am confident that we're going to have universal suffrage for the chief executive in 2017. Other than putting in place all the nitty-gritty and timetable, we have to consider the reform. Without the reform, we cannot really address the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Why is it that there is such a confrontation between the executive and the legislature? Under the Basic Law, it is an executive-led government that we have. It is for the executive branch to move bills, for LegCo to scrutinize. And members do have the right to veto the bills and to amend the bills. It's only with the endorsement of the councillors that the bills can be enacted. So this has presupposed that LegCo does have the votes, but not the power. If I used an analogy of playing football, LegCo members cannot just attack, they can only defend to stop the administration from scoring. The accountability officials and civil servants do not have to take part in the election, and their considerations would be dissimilar to LegCo members who have gone through electoral politics, and they have been shouting for something to be done, but the government doesn't take a blind bit of notice. And the political parties cannot aspire to become political ruling parties, and they don't have to be concerned about the price tag and financial implications putting forward their proposals.
There's another reason why the relationship is so bad. It's about the drawing up of constituencies. Different political forces would like to make the best use of the votes that they can garner, so they tend to have multiple lists, so that they can get as many members elected as possible. Now we have 17 political groups. Well, with the groups splitting and splintering into smaller ones, more and more political groups are asking for different things from the government. So it's a very difficult task to lobby them on the, as far as the government is concerned. And political groups can only can get their members elected if they only play to the gallery and they get the support of a minority group, say 10% of the total voters. We don't have a ruling party, we don't have a ruling coalition. The executive and the legislature are segregated, so the relationship can never be good given the system. I've heard from some senior officials and senior civil servants that they are most reluctant to come to this council or to table bills here. Those who have attended bills committee meetings will know this. At those meetings, officials will be criticized all round, and with more criticism level at them, the lower their confidence. According to a survey using the the success rates of legislation as an indicator. And that is, we look at the number of bills that the government would like to introduce in this council and the number of bills enacted. It's found that in the 15th year after reunification, some 40% of legislation did not get enacted as scheduled. And the success rate of the different CEs was similar. So it had nothing to do with the ability or competence of individual CEs. It has to do with the system. So universal suffrage or changing the post holder would make little difference. In countries with a UK-style government, they have the ruling party which control the majority in the legislature, and as a result, the relationship is more harmonious. In US-style governments, they have division of power. The executive and the legislature will be checking against each other, and the government must work with the legislature, and there are bound to be conflicts. Our system is more akin to the US style of checks and balances, and the CE and the legislature are on the different sides. The executive has the power to implement policies, coming up with budgets and drafting bills. And government bills have priorities in tabling at this council, and this council can scrutinize budgets, public expenditure, and government bills. And therefore, the legislature and the executives are checking and balancing each other. So I hope the CMAB will look at ways to just make the relationship smoother, to get ourselves out of the difficulties. Is one possible solution would be to create a ruling coalition, and that is you should share power with major parties, with in the legislature, with allies in the legislature. You will be able to govern with more confidence. It's unlike the current system that people will be appointed to the executive council or advisory bodies after members are elected here. So the appointments themselves will not entail the sharing of power. So there is no shared responsibility. A ruling coalition should be formed way before election, and there must be an agreement on how to govern, so that when the government assumes office, there will be sharing of power. But there are also problems. The government is unstable because the coalition has people with different political aspirations, and easily they can argue. And also, when the votes are close, the government may be hijacked by smaller parties. So this is just a concept, but we don't have the conditions in Hong Kong for this to be implemented now. I just want to throw this idea so that the CMAB can conduct a study on how to improve the relationship between the legislature and the executive, because 4 years later we are going to have this CE election by universal suffrage. With this segregation of the executive and the legislature, the executive has no choice but to respond to public opinion. Public opinion decides whether the government is going to be successful or not. And there will be opinion power surveys conducted by different bodies. So the attitude of the government is very important, and the number of people taking part in protests will be important. it's not a good form of representative government if we just look at the opinion polls. So we must conduct studies. The CE says he attached importance to the relationship between the legislature and executive, and he hoped the Pan Democrats would accept his invitation to the meals. But this is not the right way to create a good relationship. Given the political climate, ideas must be discussed, and we cannot expect results in the immediate term. Before the system is improved, how can we improve the executive legislature relationship? Some have criticized the policy address for the lack of any reference, but I think this has more to do with sincerity rather than anything in black and white. It would require a lot of person-to-person communication. In the Q&A session on the policy address, I have already suggested that the CE should lead all Legislative Council members on a visit to the mainland, and he should try to get home visit permits for those who cannot get such permits so far. Some reporters asked me whether I've been tipped off by the central authorities. Well, this is really laughable. I have to clarify that I have not received any such tip-off. I hope such a trip will be conducive to the improvement of relationship. Or whether this will become a reality, it would depend on the willingness of the parties concerned. Mr. Leung-sing. Thank you, President. Before I talk about constitutional development, let's review our constitutional status. Article 12 of the Basic Law states that the SAR shall be a local administrative region of the PRC, which shall enjoy a high degree of autonomy and come directly under the Central People's Government. The PRC is a state with a unitary system, not a federal system. Hong Kong is a special administrative region in a unitary state. Our system is determined by the Basic Law as promulgated by the MPC, and our autonomy is conferred under the Basic Law. All our powers are authorized by the CPG. We don't have any residual power. We cannot decide on our own our political system or change it. The CE will be ultimately returned by a system of universal suffrage. But there will be a substantive appointment procedure for CE. The CPG's power to appoint the CE is substantive and not procedural. So the power rests with the CPG, and the CPG has the power and the responsibility to be involved all the way. Any constitutional development must abide by the articles in the Basic Law. It must be supported by public opinion, and it must also satisfy the tripartite requirements in the Basic Law, and that is 2/3 of electoral members must endorse the relevant proposals. The consent of the CE is required, and also the approval or the acceptance by the MPC will be required. This is the political reality. Hong Kong enjoys a high degree of autonomy. Some people may have a different idea about what this means. Different people and different political parties must be ready to set aside differences and forge a consensus on universal suffrage. Mr. Tam Ji-yuen, Secretary for CMA, has already responded to questions that, according to past experience, if we are to amend Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the Basic Law, we will require 9 months. if different parties in this council can heed the advice and the appeal of the CE and try to find a consensus in the interest of Hong Kong, then even if we wait until 1 or 2 years later before we start the consultation on the electoral systems in 2016 and 2017, there will still be enough time. But if views are polarized, then starting the consultation any time wouldn't provide no guarantee that a good results can be achieved. Therefore, in regard to the policy address reference to the conducting consultation regarding 2016 and 2017 elections and the triggering of the relevant mechanism, well, it is acceptable and reasonable to have such a timetable. The community would sooner or later understand that this should be done in accordance with the principles in the basic law, and that is we must have regard to the interests of different sectors, and second, whatever we do must be conducive to the development of capitalist economy, and then thirdly, this must be done in an orderly and gradual manner, and then fourthly, it must be appropriate in the local Hong Kong context. People can make various comparisons with international experience. Some people agree that we should fight for universal suffrage, but universal suffrage is not a panacea. If you think all our problems can be resolved after the introduction of universal suffrage, I would say this is just unrealistic. If we look at the Western democracies, including the European PIGS countries, well, and see how they are doing, we'll know that it's not a panacea. The government should deal with livelihood issues first and enhance its effectiveness in governance. It's better to stabilize the government before we seek changes. Many members have criticized the policy address of claiming that changes will be sought, but stability will be maintained, and actually there was really little change. But I don't agree. The change advocated by the CE is being implemented, and also the CE has agreed to devolve more power to the district councils, so that the district councils can be responsible for more local initiatives, and every district will be given $100 million to take forward major district projects, and therefore we are going to see changes in both software and hardware.
This is conducive to the development of district administration. There is a chance that district issues will be addressed at the local level and local opportunities will be capitalized. Another change is to cancel the appointment system of district councillors in 2016. Over the years, district councillors have made great contributions. Most of them do not have political affiliation, and they have a rich experience and expertise in their respective areas. They've been providing useful and valuable comment in district development, and they have served as a balance. district councillors, whether they are appointed or returned directly, have made equally valuable contributions. I so speak to support the motion. Mr. Kwok-wai. In 2000, the strength of the civil service was stood at 198,000. It's been dropped. It's been reduced to 160,000, which is a great blow to the civil service. Over the years, there is an increase of the civil service, but still is at a low level. According to the number of complaints received by the ombudsman, last year it stood at 5,000. 35% of them related to failure in monitoring and supervision, and procrastination in providing services, and also failure to respond promptly. Is the civil service to blame? I think that will be unfair, because the cause of the problem is a shortage of manpower. Even with the 14,000 temporary posts, there is a shortage of manpower. Say, for example, the Hong Kong Post, which operates on the trading fund, whether it's contract staff or NCSC staff, they've been working overtime a lot, and they have not received any time off in lieu or any compensated time or compensated overtime. There is a need to review the establishment of the civil service. And the snail's pace of increasing the strength of the civil service by 1% a year, it is too slow. It gives the impression that it's easy to create posts of political assistants and undersecretaries, but when it comes to increasing manpower in the civil service that would actually improve service, it seems to be very difficult. There are about 14,000 NCSC staff. 30% of them have been serving for at least 5 years. Just like any of you, they would like to have a raise every year. They would like to get a promotion. But unfortunately, recently we've encountered a case. It's a community organizer. A lot of them have been working for over a decade. And during this time, there was no promotion. There is no medical benefit, no housing benefit. And some of them have not seen a raise at all. And what have they been waiting for? They want security. They want the administration to change them into a permanent post. But what they see is that the administration has kicked the ladder after they've climbed up the wall. We've been asking. What they say is that we've asked the NGO to provide training to you and to give you a permanent post, but they've gone back on their words. On their words on converting these NCSC positions into permanent ones. I think the administration should not take the lead to abuse this system, and they should seriously consider converting eligible NCSC staff to permanent staff, and to systematically deal with the wave of retirement of civil servants and also succession problem, and to increase manpower to ensure that public services are provided at a high quality and provided efficiently, keeping the morale of the civil service. Mrs. Virginia Ip, I know I only have just over a minute, and I would like to take the opportunity when Mr. Tan, the Secretary, is here. I appeal to him to consult on the possibility of legislating against legislating for discrimination against people with different sexual orientation. He should speak out and not succumb to pressure. Well, I think for people who oppose to the legislation, it's not because they discriminate against them. It's because they have misunderstood them. Some people think that it's fetish a form of sexual orientation, and I explained to them that sexual orientation is towards people, not some objects. Say, for example, bisexual, homosexual, and heterosexual, and it's not sometimes not a matter of choice. It's nature, not nurture. And objecting to, well, if you don't agree with people that have a different sexual orientation, doesn't amount to reverse discrimination. I think it's high time for society to have a consultation, so that our society can become a tolerant one. Mr. James Tien, I only have about a minute left. When it comes to constitutional development, we think that we have a universal suffrage for CA in 2017. The threshold should be lower than the one in 2012. That is 1/8. From the result last time, we saw that there are 3 candidates: Albert Ho, Henry Tang, and C.Y. Leung. For Albert Ho, he's got low vote and low popularity rating. So everyone rest assured that even with one person, one vote, he will not be elected. When it comes to governance, I have this idea. When the CE took office, he wanted to expand and change the administration's structure. And then he created a number of committees and councils. We see that already there is duplication in the structure. It's a waste of resources, and we're afraid that people will be fighting over power. They fight for the right to the power to make decisions. And I think by appointing people, it's better for these members to come from different sectors and different factions, and instead of just fans of C.Y. Leung, so that they can hear different views. Mr. Kin-yuen, in the question and answer session, C.Y. Leung, in answer to Ms. Emily Lau's question on why in the policy address there is so little on constitutional development, he said that we still have plenty of time. I laughed out loud at the answer, but actually, it's sad. When would we start? Let me take you back to 1983. I was the deputy chairman of the student union of the Hong Kong U. We released a submission on Hong Kong people on democracy in Hong Kong. It is one of the first submissions made on Hong Kong's future. It's been 30 years. 30 years ago, what was the main theme? We inherited a theme of a student movement in 1970s. At that time, they were talking about anti-colonialism. And then we thought, well, because because we're Chinese, there should be reunification. And at the time of reunification, we thought that we should seize the opportunity and realize democratic development. And that was the stance of the Hong Kong Youth Student Union in 1983. We think that the legislature and the CE should be returned by universal suffrage, and we should emerge, we should appear on the map of China as a good model. We wrote to the then Premier Zhao Ziyang, and he wrote a letter to reply to us, and he said, we support what you said about Hong Kong, about autonomy of Hong Kong. Unfortunately, we saw what happened to Mr. Zhao and what happened in Hong Kong. And it's been 30 years. We have had a reunification for over 10 years, and still we have not seen any progress in democratic development. We've been waiting for a way to resolve problems. If there is no option that is mutually acceptable to us, a way to make decisions, then inevitably we will fall into attrition and conflict. Some people may find it annoying. There are a lot of noises. The cause itself is complicated. And one of the reasons is because we don't have a good platform to discuss matters and issues. Do we have an effective platform? Well, now that I'm in the council, I have first-hand experience that this is not an effective one. And I don't think that our next-door neighbor, the central government complex, have something similar in place. We have an unfair political system. But we want to resolve problems and conflict. But if you want to remain stagnant, that will remain a dream. There are changes in the international arena. We can only move forward. It's only a matter of how quick a pace we will take. But don't forget that we've been talking about it for 30 years. Sau-lan has a constitutional responsibility to take it forward. The election of LegCo in 2016, it's a complicated issue, and it's related to the election method of the CE in 2017. So we're talking about a very complicated matter. Honestly, I have high expectations and high hopes for 2017, but I'm afraid I might be disappointed. What we're waiting to see is, after the policy address, whether Sau-lan can give us or will give us a timetable. I believe people who are fighting for pursuing for democracy, they will use different ways to realize our dream, to fulfill the task we have upon our shoulders, and we hope that Sau-lan will take a bold step to fulfill his duty. I don't mind spending another 10 or 20 years fighting for it, but I think it will be Hong Kong as a whole that suffers.
Mr. Kenneth Leung, President Hong Kong's core values were subject to a great deal of blows in the form of corruption of the officials, electoral frauds, and also other factors. We have the former Chief Secretary, the former CE and the existing CE being investigated by the ICAC. We have Mak Chai-kwong, Paul Chan, Franklin Lam, who have been called into question regarding their integrity. We've also seen vote rigging. In the process of CE election, there were suspicions of bribery, and there were trial society being involved in a dinner. And in terms of human rights and freedom of journalism, we have an increasing number of people being arrested. The police are resorting to OC foam or pepper spray against the demonstrators. The reporters, when covering stories about the dignitaries, were impeded. Recently, the government went so far as to restrict people's access to directors' information under the company's ordinance. All these unreasonable restriction of freedom of information is sounding a death knell of freedom of journalism. We have slipped from 28th before to 58th in 2013. We have slipped by 40 places. If we enjoy genuine democracy, then the people will have a political avenue to be involved in government policies. Demonstrations and rallies will not be the only avenue to express their views. The escalation of rallies and public processions is an indication of people's desire to be involved. Other than taking to the street, there will be no other option or revenue available to them to bring pressure to bear on the administration. If people have a genuine channel to participate, the police will not have to resort to this high-handed attitude to crack down on demonstrators. The people of Hong Kong have been fighting for democracy for well over 2 decades. We aspire for universal suffrage, for chief executive and LegCo. Unfortunately, in this policy address, there is a very limited coverage devoted to this. It merely says that at the right time, on a question of universal suffrage for the CE in 2017 and LegCo in 2016, there will be extensive consultation and the constitutional procedures will be activated. I feel very disappointed and angered by it. I feel that the chief executive has scored a big fat 0 in the area of constitutional development. We have been debating the definition of democracy for so long. I urge the administration to get started with discussions on constitutional development. The Professional Commons position is clear. We hope that there will be a low threshold. There will be no screening in the election of the chief executive. We hope that functional constituencies should go as soon as possible. There should be universal suffrage for all the seats in LegCo. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. K.K. Fung, President, when Siu-ping was elected, before he was elected, he said that he wouldn't be running for office for the nth term. And it was said that there were mainland officials coming down to Hong Kong or Shenzhen to election near for him. At the moment he was elected, he went scurrying to the liaison office to say thank you. And he also said he wanted to be re-elected in 2017, but within a couple of months, what has happened in Hong Kong? First of all, there are so many grand ideas in his manifesto, but he refused to do it. There are UBWs, the housing allowance problems, his own integrity, and he merely replicated from Donald Tsang's policy address, national education, Northeast NT, and so on. He is double talking. We are very concerned that if he wanted to get re-elected, would he become the barrier to universal suffrage? Will he be doing anything to obstruct universal suffrage? The Democrats will have to veto any undemocratic models. As chief executive, he does have the obligation to help the people of Hong Kong, in particular this generation and the younger generation, to start universal suffrage. But given his background, given his ambition to become the chief executive, he would become an impediment to Hong Kong aspiring for universal suffrage. And at the end of the day, we will be blamed for not being able to achieve anything. President, universal suffrage is very straightforward. Our system cannot be tailor-made for certain people. The system cannot be tailor-made to disallow certain people to run for office. President, these words are very clear from the community. I hope that the Secretary would make it abundantly clear later on when he speaks how the ruling team will secure universal suffrage for Hong Kong in 2017, a system with low threshold, with no limitation on the pro-establishment and pro and anti-establishment members to take part. Dr. Kwok-him. We are witnessing this stalemate in Hong Kong. This is really worrying. All these shouldn't have happened. Since the CE election last year through to LegCo election, we have seen episodes after episodes of the liaison office through various channels interfering with CE election and LegCo election. The people's response can't be clearer. They would much rather wait for hours on end to cast a blank vote. Before he assumed office, we would like to take to the street and stand up and be counted and vote, cast a vote of no confidence in this electoral system. The Basic Law was promulgated in 1990. We cannot see a genuine desire to implement Article 48, 45 and 68 and achieve universal suffrage for Hong Kong. You probably recall that when we had our first direct election, Taiwan was still stuck with the old legislature. It wasn't until 1992 that they had election for the legislature. Right now they have the right, the only place in among Chinese they can elect the president. We feel distressed seeing this. We heard from a lot of fellow councillors that election will cause chaos. Should we go back to a totalitarian system where the councillors would be just a rubber stamp, and they would feel very relaxed because then there wouldn't be any more noises. It's just like the central authorities. There are no undesirable noises because they have a way to silence them, and this is wreaking havoc on Hong Kong. We have room for survival because we have a clean institution, freedom of journalism, clean election. We have freedom of expression. We have a judiciary. But over the years, what we have seen is that they are being undermined. Talking about a judiciary system, Mr. Bukhari, the retired judge, made the point that he did. I don't want to repeat it. The universal suffrage is still a long way off. I think we need the chief executive to be willing to do it. We can't see in the policy address any measures to help us achieve universal suffrage in 2017 and 2020. And this is the impediment to us seeking to achieve this. If the government is still recalcitrant and doing something to impede any further democratic development in Hong Kong, then the administration will be the culprit. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Daniel Kwok.
President, I remember that when the chief executive was running for office, he said time and time again about the importance of the rule of law, of our legal system. He said time and time again that these are the core values of the Hong Kong people. And here, again, in this policy address, a few empty words about the importance of the rule of law and how that is the core values of the Hong Kong people. Well, here's to empty words and emptier promises. This policy address. There's nothing on safeguarding the rule of law, nothing but empty words. nothing on legal aid expansion, nothing on independent legal aid authority, nothing on providing better access to courts, nothing on strengthening our legal system, nothing on providing more resources and support to judiciary, nothing on how we can cut down court waiting times, nothing on better protection of human rights. President, if there are emptier words or emptier promises, they are here in this policy address, which has nothing but a fake promise which resonates of Chief Executive Election's campaign pledge. His first policy address offers nothing on any of these core values. President, if there are more important things that we need to safeguard, it is, of course, the rule of law and independent judiciary. Yet this administration's attitude on safeguarding the rule of law can be described in 3 words: weak, weak, weak. Justice cannot be upheld if citizens do not have access to it. And that is why free and equal access to courts has always been a key element in the rule of law. I need not remind the Secretary for Justice. Legal aid is a service that the modern state owes to its citizens who cannot afford private legal services. And the current provision of legal aid services is administered not by an independent legal aid authority, but by a legal aid department under the Home Affairs Bureau. Now, the profession have said time and time again that this arrangement is totally unsatisfactory. Difficulties arise in situations of direct conflict of interest. The conflict issue is not just a theoretical one. Evidence shows that the legal aid department has not fared well under the Home Affairs Bureau, whereas the legal aid department and the Department of Justice had comparable budgets of around 500 and 600 million per year in the 20 years before 1997. The legal aid department's budget has been effectively static since, hovering in around 700 to 800 million per year, while the Department of Justice has more than doubled to over 1.3 billion per year. Both the Law Society and the Bar Association report that the legal aid department has become more bureaucratic and less customer-friendly in recent years in handling of legal aid applications. Clients complain that legal aid officials now seem more interested in administrative compliance than in the department's mission of assisting those in need. Combined with miserable low financial eligibility limits that have not even kept up with inflation, the decline in legal aid has resulted in the unacceptable high number of unrepresented litigants in our local courts. Currently, more than a third of all cases have unrepresented litigants. This, of course, has a negative impact on the proper administration of justice in Hong Kong, creating a huge burden on judicial resources and judges. When the Legal Aid Services Council was first established in 1996 to oversee the legal aid department, it was seen as an interim measure. Experience shows that the Council does not have enough resources and the necessary statutory power to act effectively. It cannot manage the legal aid department properly and adequately without any legally trained and independent research staff of its own. The legal aid department is supposed to look to the Council for policy leadership, but that is, in reality, impossible when the Home Affairs Bureau is calling the shots. With attitudes of complacency and inertia prevailing in the Bureau and no one in the legal aid department tasked to look into reform and improve services, it is hardly a surprise that legal aid reforms so far have been piecemeal and ineffective. During his election campaign, the Chief Executive reassured the Hong Kong people that he would do his best to promote the rule of law during his term. Well, we know what happened to that. The golden opportunity for this administration to show its commitment on the rule of law is by establishing an independent legal aid department. It's of expanding the scope of legal aid, has been called upon by the Law Society President and the Bar Association Chairman in the recent speeches. But that has not been done. Most important of all in this policy address is that by looking at the rule of law in our legal system simply as a business and professional services, we are missing an important point about the rule of law and the values that comes with the rule of law. I can do no better by referring to the Chief Justice's speech this year in the opening of the legal year. He reminded us the importance of the rule of law in two facets. One is of transparency, the second of reasoning. The judicial process in Hong Kong is a transparent and open process. Courts, in as much as possible, are open to the public. Members are free to attend to see how judges do their work and whether they are doing it fairly, rightly. It is there to see. The second facet of the judicial process that we have is that of the reasoning of judges. The reasoning is the epitome of the rule of law. The reasoning given by judges is how we see and how we weigh, how we assess whether the courts are doing their job. And whether the reason convinces us is the barometer of the quality of our judicial standards. And those are the reasons why that the Hong Kong people do not trust the interpretation of the Basic Law by the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Those were the reasons why that the Hong Kong people cannot accept that a political body can, without transparency and without adequate reasoning, interpret the sacred provisions of our Basic Law, which sets out the framework of one country, two system, a framework, a constitution that we helped crafted. The reasoning is what we expect from judges. By withholding adequate resources and support to the judiciary and judges when they perform their jobs in courts, we are taking away time and energy that judges can have and spend in providing the reasoning of their judgments to members of the public. And thereby we are weakening the very foundation of the rule of law. Yet this administration continues its course without any promises or any policy commitments in giving our judiciary more resources, more support, so that judges can focus more of their energy on deciding cases and providing their reasons to public and of improving the quality of our legal system in Hong Kong. The legal system is not simply there to serve business or simply there to boost our economic GDP. It is there to serve the people, and it is there to represent the core values of the Hong Kong people. Yet this administration has nothing but empty words to offer. Finally, President, a word about democratic development, which again, nothing. We know that in the long run, a democratic system is the basic safeguard or the last safeguard for the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary, because it is ingrained in the democratic values of the Hong Kong people that we are to have independent judiciary, that the rule of law go hand in hand with democratic aspiration. And without democratic development going forward, we cannot guarantee, we cannot safeguard the independence of the judiciary and our legal system without proper democratic reform. Yet government is silent, nothing in the policy address on these issues. President, I am to sit down with a heavy heart, hoping that the officials sitting across me will take it to heart that the rule of law, we really cannot sit and allow the foundations of the rule of law to be weakened and unfixed while under our guard. That these words, I hope, would resonate not only in these chambers but in the community, that we really need to do more for the rule of law in Hong Kong. And if we don't, we stand, my Lord President, if we don't take this opportunity to strengthen the rule of law, in generations ahead, we stand to lose out not only our position, our unique position under one country, two systems, but the next generation will be sad to see that we are the ones who have allowed the foundations of the rule of law to be broken and unfixed. President, this is my speech. Thank you.
Mr. Kwok-him. President, in his policy address, the CE points out that the government will abolish all appointed seats since the fifth term of district councils. The DAB subscribed to this, but we have to bear in mind this fact. Many appointed members have been serving the public. They have been contributing to the community. They have been serving in the on the councils, district councils, with this commitment. And in the past, the appointment criteria that were based on social service and district needs, and also to make appointments in the light of overall public interest. So from this, we can see the appointed district councillors are competent and can help the district councils of fulfilling its functions. So while we would cancel the appointed seats, we must be mindful about the consequences. After the abolition of appointed seats, some councils will have the number of seats reduced. Would that affect the operation of those district councils? For example, like Wan Chai, there will only be 11 elected district councillors, and they will have to serve 160,000 resident population and 600,000 mobile population. So with fewer district councillors, social service and the work of the district council will be affected. And because of past district development, in some district councils, the population has been growing, and district councillors have to be responsible for more and larger areas. And that may affect the quality of work. For example, Eastern District, Sha Tin, and Kwun Tong, the district councils are big. Let's look at Eastern District Council, which I'm familiar. The district has been developing, says Siu-ping and Wan Chai. The district council has to serve a bigger population. It's now 500,000. And Wan Chai District and Eastern District Council are very different, although they are both on Hong Kong Island. So the boundaries of different constituencies should be reviewed. There are also going to be major projects which would result in population increase. For example, 85,000 in Kai Tak. Anderson Road project would bring in more than 70,000 people. The new population will need to be served. So which neighboring district councils should take up the responsibility, or should there be a new district administration unit? There should be early consultation and planning to chart the way forward. The administration should look at population projections in determining the number of seats for the fifth term of district councils. The opportunity should also be taken in reviewing the boundaries of the 18 district councils so as to even out the anomalies, so that the boundaries can be set reasonably. President, recently the media are very concerned about the subsidiary legislation under the company's ordinance, which would restrict access to directors' personal particulars, including ID numbers and telephone numbers. And the administration is also considering imposing restrictions on searching for vehicle owners' particulars. It's said that this would affect people's right to know and press freedom. With awareness of personal rights effort on the increase, privacy is something we cannot ignore. In 2010, Octopus Company was said to have leaked personal particulars of Octopus cars users to commercial operators, and the company received $40 million for the transfer of personal data. The company was criticized all round by the community. The Octopus incident exposed the inadequate protection on people's privacy. And that's why there have been reviews on relevant laws and measures to improve protection. We believe that the amendments to the company's ordinance were meant to achieve the same aims. That is the protection of the 1 million directors and their privacy, and also to get the right balance between the privacy protection and access to information. The DAB hopes that after weighing the different needs, there should be a proper discussion on the way forward so that we can reach the maximum consensus as much as possible. The Basic Law has been implemented in Hong Kong for a long time. But there's a lot to be done to facilitate proper understanding of the Basic Law, because if understood incorrectly, it would be very dangerous to talk about the Basic Law, what the Basic Law means. There's a proposal that the police would consult the district council on public demonstrations. Some members refer to Article 93 with a reference, or 97, with a reference to the functions of district councils, saying that the district councils are there to provide services such as cultural recreation and environmental sanitation. And they ignore the consultative role of district councils, and that's why they query that the police proposal would be unconstitutional, contrary to the Basic Law.
Well, whether they deliberately or inadvertently misread the meaning of the Basic Law, and this will cause inconvenience and in turn mislead Hong Kong people as well. In order to stop the misunderstanding, I hope that when it comes to with upholding the Basic Law, there should be more publicity and education campaign, so that members of the public and some legislators will have a comprehensive and accurate understanding of the Basic Law. I'd also like to talk about some heated issues, one of which is about parallel goods traders. This problem has been plaguing residents for a number of years, and over the internet, after a few waves of actions to recover certain locations, and this topic has been heated up again. And I understand that the administration has held press conferences on measures to be taken. And this is not just a localized problem, and it has extended from Changshui along the East Rail Line to other areas. Not just Chung-kai, you see GMO, general merchandise operators in Kuntong as well. And they have caused great nuisance to people's life, not just those in Changshui. We fully understand that. We have done a lot of follow-up work, which include reflecting the problems to the administration and mainland authorities and ask them to take enforcement actions to combat such activities. Last Sunday in Mongkok, there is another recovery campaign to recover Mongkok. A large group of people besiege some GMOs, general merchandise operators, and they stage protests outside shops and call names of suspected GMOs, calling them pigs and thieves. This will not resolve the problems of parallel goods activities. This also tarnish Hong Kong's image as peaceful and rational people. This also shows. This also brings another problem. Why will Hong Kong people be more and more radical in their reaction towards parallel goods activities? It shows that people are unhappy about the effectiveness of actions taken by the authority. Mr. Lai has been saying that a series of targeted enforcement actions will be taken. And there are a number of targeted actions mounted jointly by law enforcement agencies, and a group of GMOs have been arrested. But the majority of them have been released without being charged. So people now have doubt about whether such actions will effectively resolve the problem that has been troubling their lives. Mr. Lai, the secretary, said on a number of occasions that these enforcement actions have proved to be effective. It's just that they're not felt by the general public. Outside Changshui train station, there is an assembly of over 1,000 couriers. That's completely packed the areas near Changshui. The police chased them away, and they simply moved to Fanling, turning Fanling into another disastrous area. So apart from taking enforcement actions, they should explore other ways to tackle this problem. Say, for example, from immigration perspective, or taking administrative measures. Say, for example, by restricting people taking goods out of Hong Kong. And in a Shenzhen NPC meeting, on the issue of couriers bringing goods across the border, they have had a discussion. Mr. Wang Hokley said that they're studying about setting a system, indicator system, to draw authorities' attention to suspected couriers, so that they research and questioned, and this will be effective in combating such activities. There is also demand to cancel the multiple entry scheme, and this will stifle the normal interaction between people of the two places. So we do not support this proposal, but we think that conditions may be imposed. Say, for example, one entry per day, We'll see if such measures will achieve our objectives. Next, on district administration, I would like to speak on behalf of the DAB, addressing district issues at the local level and capitalizing on local opportunities. This is a new concept of the CY on district administration. Over the years, district councils is an important partner of the administration on the district level. They feel the pulse of the people. They understand what people need. And they are an important part in building harmony in society. And over the years, they've been giving valuable comments, making great contributions. And over the years, the administration has enhanced the roles and functions of the district councils on a district level so that they can create a better living environment for residents, and that is an important objective of district administration. Since the launching of the district minor works in the last term of the district council, there are over 2,000 such projects being undertaken all over the 18 districts. They cover as small as a bench on the roadside to a ball court. And they have successfully meet the local needs, and the effectiveness have been confirmed by local residents. So when it comes to the proposal of additional resources to district councils to undertake district minor works, and one-off grants of $100 million in each district to organize projects and programs or activities. It deserves a round of applause from us. This will be put to very good use, and this will in turn benefit Hong Kong people. A lot of people, including council and members in the council, worry that this will be another white elephant, and in the end, public money will be wasted. This will not be a bright spot. If there are requests to speed up certain projects, it's because councillors have collected views from the residents, and there is such a need. Before the project is implemented, you see it in a bad light because you have some preconceived ideas. It's not conducive to the effectiveness of the project. And this is not something the public would like to see, because it's not for their good. There is a shortage of manpower in the secretariat of district councils, and this in turn affects the implementation of projects. This will have to be dealt with seriously. Hopefully, in the coming term, resources will be increased. So that projects will be implemented more implemented more smoothly, and our work will get the support it requires. Well, I talked about an important part of district administration, and there is actually one important part: resources. Every year in a policy address debate, I've always said that when it comes to shortage of resources available to district councils, the administration should address this issue, because this will in turn affect the quality of service provided to the public. Given a high rental environment, ward offices are expensive, and ward offices is an essential part of a councillor's work. If the ward office is not in a public housing estate, the rental allowance will not be able to cover the space of a desk in the private market. We had the pleasure to have Mr. Raymond Tam, the Secretary, to visit us in our ward offices, for him to see with his own eyes what the condition is. Given the current level of allowances, we may not be able to hire someone of a high caliber. We may not even be able to pay utility charges. Councillors have been voicing their strong request to have a higher allowance, because more often than not they have to pay the expenses out of their own pocket. This time round, the CY said in a policy address in paragraph 192 that they will also review the allowance and expense reimbursement arrangements for DC members as appropriate, including the arrangements for renting premises for ward offices. This is an uplifting piece of news. This shows that the administration cares about district councillors. I hope that this will be actually be implemented instead of just another few empty words. And they should consider increasing the resources available to us to cover all operating cost of a ward office, so that they will address the concerns of district councillors promptly. And in the long run, they should consider putting in a rental subsidy for ward offices by providing, say, for example, $4,000 as accountable expenditure if the ward office rental is above $6,000. Mr. President, district councillors would like to get some opportunities to broaden their horizon, and through overseas visits they will be able to see things from a different perspective and see more. It will open their eyes, and it's very important for district councillors.
At the present moment, I understand that overseas duty visits would be regarded as official visits. And many a time, the councillors will have to pick up the tab. The DAB very much hopes that the administration would reconsider this. LegCo members do have such an arrangement. If this arrangement can be replicated at the district council level, for district councillors to be given a certain amount of allowance to engage in overseas duty visits, and they will be able to engage in these official exchanges, that would certainly be good for the councillors in nurturing their debating skills. Mr. Ronnie Tong, Mr. Deputy, if